Hello, my name is Matt Kelly, and I'm from Drexel University's College of Computing and Informatics. My talk today is titled WASAPIfying Private Web Archiving Tools for Persistence and Collaboration. These slides are available on the link in the footer. Before I get into the concrete aspects of this work, I first want to give a high-level overview of the purpose and goals of what I was trying to accomplish. I will go into this a little bit more, but there exists a standard for grabbing work files from sources that implement a protocol developed a few years ago. Being a developer at one time of a few different web archiving tools, I sought to implement this protocol for allowing for the replay of these captures on one's own machine, that is the PC on their desktop, so as to not solely rely on these services for what they have implicitly determined as important by specifying the URIs to have been archived. This protocol's name was WASAPI and was funded by IMLS a couple years ago in a project that was a collaboration between the Internet Archive, Stanford University Libraries, North Texas Libraries, and Rutgers University. I must note here that I was not involved in this project, and the work described here is not affiliated with the initial efforts, but rather seeks to reuse the products of the project as permitted. Given the goals of the IMLS project was indicative of facilitating interoperability and collaborative development, the work here is in a similar spirit to the original project's objectives. Enabling other tools to communicate with archival sources using the WASAPI protocol is what I mean here by WASAPIfying in this work. Going back to the tools I had originally developed, they mainly focused on encouraging individuals to archive the part of the web they care about from the systems they use every day. This content may be on the private web, for example, content behind authentication, or simply be private in the sense that the results of their preservation efforts are not available to the public. In a sense, the tools are meant to serve as the basis of a personal archive, regardless of the content held within or the subsequent degree of availability after archiving is complete. The idea here is that by more individuals archiving the web, aggregating these different perspectives gives a more complete picture of the web of the past at a more temporally granular level, but also of content that may be inappropriate for public web archives to preserve. These two tools have been around for a few years. The first, Whale, is a native desktop application that bundles up a web archival replay system and an archival crawler, both of which have been well supported by the IIPC in the past. More so, it contains a graphical user interface that allows interaction with these tools to be as simple as specifying a URL and clicking a button, much in the same way as Internet Archive Save Page Now feature, except the results are stored on a user's PC. The second tool with which I sought to instill the powers of WASAPI was Interplanetary Wayback. This project was originally a collaboration with Sawud Alam, now at the Internet Archive, and integrated work files from any source into the Interplanetary file system. Both of these tools were presented at as an earlier incarnation at a previous IIPC WAC. With a collaboration aspect in the title of this presentation, the idea of personal web archives has been around for some time, but the sharing of captures by individuals is still relatively novel and relatively problematic because of the potential for PII. By users preserving content and having access to work files directly, there exists a potential for data interchange, that is, users sharing their captures by some means. WASAPI, in this case, provides a means of data interchange of works. Our prior work with Interplanetary Wayback also provided an aspect of data interchange and encouraging users to share their indexes so as to not limit their holdings to their own machine to facilitate the redundancy that comes with pinning on IPFS. The persistence aspect here comes from Interplanetary Wayback and ensuring captures that are pooled are not solely hosted on the user's machine, at the user's discretion, of course. With the additional ability to pool our captures from hosted services that implement WASAPI, the tools further encourage redundancy of the archived data. A few products of the original IMLS grant were client libraries to enable other tools to leverage WASAPI to do exactly this. The expectation here is that the clients will access the captures at any WASAPI server, and to the best of my knowledge at this time, only Archive and Rhizome's Conifer service, previously web recorder, implement WASAPI server. So these were the original services with which I anticipated interfacing my tools. That is, the goal was to be able to grab captures from each of these services and replay them locally. Because both whale and interplanetary wayback are written in Python, the natural choice here was to reuse the Pi WASAPI client from UNT libraries and bake it into these two tools. This library is both a command line application, but also a Python module. So thanks to the great work at UNT, this has initially been possible. I started on this project last year in anticipation for delivery at WAC 2020, but as we know, the conference was first postponed and then canceled. The original attempt was relatively rushed, so was scrapped earlier this year and started anew with identical goals of integration. Our contribution here was not necessarily just the implementations, but also the validation of the usefulness of the products produced from the IMLS grant. Our goals here were to implement UNT's WASAPI client library into both whale and interplanetary wayback to be able to pull works from both Archive It and Conifer, both of which implement WASAPI server. Given these services both theoretically implement the same protocol, we anticipated being able to reuse the logic between both the services, but also similar code between the two tools with slightly different hooks. We created a layer atop of UNT's module that acted as an interface between a user specifying the parameters like username, password, and service from a GUI into the expected parameters and programmatic flow that the library required. This was straightforward, but also provided an opportunity for reuse beyond these tools through a separate independent web-based interface, the library that could be used to grab works independent of these two tools. The aforementioned WASAPI web interface is shown here on the right and bundled as a primary means of using WASAPI from interplanetary wayback. IP wayback, while it has a UI, also requires some level of interfacing via the command line at this time. So as a web-based interface is within the theme of the tool. Whale, however, is a desktop GUI application. Within one of the tabs of the app, I added a button that invokes a new window that contains a native interface in Whale, very much akin to that of WASAPI. Submission from either of these interfaces sends a request to the same WASAPI endpoint. Some technical challenges we encountered in doing this and made evident by UNT's library was that the interfaces at Conifer and Archive It varied slightly. This is somewhat by design, as WASAPI only defines a minimum level of implementation to be compliant and allows for extended optional functionality. Another issue was that there is an inherent discrepancy in the replay of works created by other tools with the intention of being replayed both by those like tools. For example, the open wayback that is included in Whale may not be able to accurately render a web page with recent web technologies in which Web Recorder's Pi wayback is capable. Another limitation of the API, at least from the user standpoint, was that descriptive metadata like the collection title and synopsis is not available through WASAPI and must be subsequently fetched. Because of this, the initial implementation in Whale and IP wayback is not necessarily as descriptive as the contents of the works as they could be. This will be improved in future work. As I mentioned earlier, this work was not funded by IMLS, nor in fact any other explicit monetary source. Both of these tools were originally passion projects, and while Whale was at one point funded by NEH while I was still a graduate student, the NEH did not support the WASAPI implementation, nor were they or any other source asked. Another challenge, of course, that might be understandable for any other faculty is that the work is better suited for exploration by a graduate student, but given I recently was one, the tendency to just do it myself has not yet worn off. We're hoping that future work, if funded, can be executed by a graduate student. And as is relevant to this conference, we at one point hope to fund this work through the IIPC discretionary funding program, but because my university is not yet a member, this was not allowed without support from other members, which did not come to fruition. So at the end of the day, I wanted to become more familiar with WASAPI, so did the work anyway in the same spirit of the tools being passion projects. I do want to reiterate that this is the beginning of further explorations in implementing additional features of WASAPI into other tools. In the future, I am hoping to also implement the WASAPI server for these tools to act as a data source in and of themselves, but also to allow some aspects of pushing work to these tools, which is more in scope for personal web archives than those available from organizations. So as a summary, the goal was to implement WASAPI into whale and interplanetary wayback. The collaborative aspect, while inherent in being able to share the works grabbed from these sources, needs more exploration for concepts like storytelling based on captures from various personal web archiving sources. And there's still a lot that can be done. For example, the discoverability aspect of these personal web archives. We also hope to bring in more functions of the rapidly evolving high fidelity web archiving stack from Web Recorder and more fully leverage the great work of UNT's WASAPI library. As with any tool, its usage will help to better inform the future intuitiveness of the interface. In closing, the work described in this presentation is free and open source software. There's no end game or personal interest in harvesting your information, just a goal to make the tools more useful, interoperable, and collaborative. More information on these tools, the improvements made for this endeavor, and future goals are available at the links provided here. Thank you for your time.